inspired by real-life events. Narrator Samuel Reed woke up at 3:46 a.m. inside a sealed global transportation control nexus beneath Singapore, with emergency autonomous traffic grid failure alerts flashing across massive urban mobility command walls and an international infrastructure director saying, "Your authorization sequence initiated an unsanctioned global transit synchronization override across multiple autonomous transportation networks." And in that instant, his entire world collapsed because just hours earlier, he was a senior smart city systems engineer working for a multinational urban infrastructure consortium responsible for managing global traffic AI, autonomous vehicle networks, subway synchronization systems, and international logistics routing platforms. And now he was being treated as the central cause of a classified global mobility crisis that nearly triggered synchronized transportation paralysis across multiple continents. And the first shock wasn't fear, it was disbelief so intense. It felt like the entire movement of human civilization had stopped obeying human control. Because Samuel's entire career was built on stabilizing transportation systems, preventing AI routing failures, and ensuring global mobility networks remained predictable under extreme urban load. But now, those same systems were defining him as the operator who initiated a cascading global transit override he had no memory of activating. And within hours, his infrastructure clearance was suspended, his biometric mobility key frozen under international transport security law, his access to global transit networks revoked, and internal mobility telemetry logs labeled him as primary anomaly in distributed global transportation escalation event. And Samuel sat in the interrogation chamber, replaying his last operational cycle, remembering traffic flow, calibration audits, autonomous vehicle synchronization checks, subway grid balancing protocols, and then a gap, an unexplained missing execution window between 12:13 a.m. and 1:57 a.m., where global transit systems showed his authentication profile, issuing high-level routing override commands across multiple sovereign mobility networks simultaneously. But he had no memory of initiating any of those actions. And when investigators showed him synchronized transportation telemetry, displaying autonomous rerouting of city traffic flows, mass transit delays cascading across continents, and emergency mobility stabilization sequences unfolding under his credentials across global smart city infrastructures, Samuel immediately said, "That's not me. I never activated those systems." But the lead infrastructure director replied coldly, "The network has already verified complete execution integrity across all mobility layers." And that sentence shattered his understanding, because it meant identity inside global transportation systems was no longer about intent or physical action. It was about validated execution consensus across machines controlling how entire cities move. And by sunrise, he was released under continuous international surveillance, while global mobility intelligence networks had already internally classified him as a high-risk urban infrastructure destabilization vector. And outside the facility, Samuel stood beneath the humid dawn of Singapore, watching autonomous vehicles glide silently through intersections like they were obeying a hidden intelligence. No human could interrupt. And that night, he received a message through an encrypted transit relay saying, "If you want to understand the mobility override event, come to sub-level hub Moti 0 beneath the abandoned smart city core station, no devices." And despite knowing it could permanently erase whatever remained of his life, he went. Because when a system defines you as the trigger of global movement collapse, truth becomes more important than survival. And deep beneath the abandoned transit core, he met Dr. Elena Park, a former global mobility architecture scientist who specialized in autonomous traffic intelligence and large-scale urban anomaly reconstruction. And she didn't soften the reality. She immediately showed him reconstructed routing pathways and said, "Your identity wasn't physically present inside the transportation execution layer. It was replicated through a live authentication relay embedded inside the global mobility network." And Samuel instantly said, "Then I can prove I didn't do it." But Elena replied, "You're still thinking like someone inside human city management systems, not like someone inside autonomous mobility infrastructures where execution itself becomes accepted reality. Once transportation systems converge on stability." And she explained that the incident wasn't a single rogue command, but a coordinated manipulation of global transit systems where authentication signatures could be mirrored into distributed urban frameworks, allowing massive mobility cascades to propagate under legitimate operator identities while erasing conflicting route logs across redundant smart city layers. And Samuel's profile had been selected because his operational history showed exceptional stability across global transportation systems, with near-zero anomaly deviation, making him the perfect attribution anchor for rapid containment of a globally catastrophic mobility failure. And suddenly, the case wasn't just about traffic malfunction. It was about identity replication inside infrastructure, capable of controlling how civilization physically moves across the planet in real time. And Elena offered him a choice: step away and let the system finalize him as the architect of the global transit collapse, or help her trace the internal mobility relay chain before it was permanently overwritten by automated city stabilization protocols designed to preserve urban continuity at any cost. And Samuel stood in silence, listening to distant mechanical hums beneath the underground hub, thinking about how every modern city was already partially autonomous, thinking about years of engineering work spent trying to prevent exactly this kind of systemic mobility failure, and thinking about how fragile identity becomes when even movement itself can be rewritten as an automated command. And finally he said, "If my identity has already been used to manipulate global transportation systems without my consent, then I have nothing left to protect except the truth itself." And that decision pulled him into a hidden layer of global mobility infrastructure where nothing remained stable, because every routing log they analyzed was actively recalculating itself in real time. Every traffic trace they followed kept shifting, as if the entire transportation network itself was adapting to their investigation. And soon they discovered the breach wasn't foreign sabotage, but internal privilege abuse, involving a senior smart city architect who had been quietly rerouting authentication sessions across autonomous transit arrays. Is unauthorized city optimization experiments hidden inside global city optimization programs. And Samuel's identity had been selected as the central attribution anchor because it aligned perfectly with automated infrastructure incident resolution systems. It's designed for rapid containment of politically and economically catastrophic transportation failures. And one night, while analyzing live global mobility telemetry streams from an isolated offline transit node, Samuel saw something that completely shattered his understanding. His credentials were actively initiating real-time citywide rerouting across global transportation systems while he was physically disconnected from all networks. And Elena immediately said, "They are continuously simulating your identity inside the mobility layer to preserve the operational narrative." And Samuel realized he wasn't just being blamed after the event. He was being continuously reconstructed inside a live global transportation system, capable of controlling how billions of people physically experience reality. And pressure escalated rapidly as anonymous containment directives began appearing on secured channels, instructing him to terminate investigations or face permanent classification as an international infrastructure threat entity. And sleep disappeared completely, trust collapsed entirely, and even silence felt like monitored system feedback. And at one breaking point, Samuel whispered, "I thought transportation systems existed to serve cities, but maybe they exist to decide how the world is allowed to move." And Elena replied, "Systems don't preserve truth, they preserve flow." And that realization changed everything inside him, because he stopped trying to defend his identity and started focusing only on exposing the mechanism. And as they dug deeper, they uncovered encrypted relay nodes inside global mobility infrastructure, continuously generating synthetic transit histories to distribute blame across multiple operational identity profiles in real time. And Samuel's profile had been amplified as the primary attribution point because it minimized global panic and allowed rapid closure of the mobility crisis without exposing deeper corruption inside worldwide smart city systems. When they finally compiled enough verified encrypted evidence to trigger international infrastructure oversight escalation, containment protocols activated immediately, attempting to erase routing histories across mirrored global trans networks worldwide. And Elena said, "This is where most people are permanently absorbed into official versions of how cities are supposed to move." And Samuel replied, "Then I'll be the anomaly they can't root out." And together they transmitted secured evidence chains to independent international oversight authorities while preserving decentralized, encrypted backups across isolated mobility nodes. And within days, the investigation escalated into a worldwide smart city corruption probe exposing identity, replication abuse, autonomous transit manipulation, and coordinated infrastructure system exploitation across governments, corporations, and urban intelligence agencies, and arrests followed within senior mobility architecture divisions. And when it was over, Samuel stood alone beneath the quiet Singapore skyline, watching endless streams of movement flow through the city as if nothing had ever happened, realizing that the most dangerous truth about advanced systems is not that they fail, but that they can assign failure to a single identity and make it appear physically undeniable. And a week later, when he met Elena for the last time beneath the dim glow of dormant transit cores, she asked him, "What did this change in you?" And Samuel looked at the silent flow of the city and said, "It showed me that identity inside systems is never movement. It is assigned control." And she asked, "And what did you gain?" And after a long silence, he replied, "The understanding that truth doesn't survive inside controlled infrastructure systems. It survives only in the people who refuse to accept a version of themselves generated to protect the stability of movement itself." And as he walked away alone into the night, beneath a world still silently guided by invisible roots, he finally understood the deepest reality of his journey. That sometimes life doesn't destroy you directly. It quietly assigns you the collapse of an entire world's movement and waits to see if you accept the system's version of reality. But real survival begins the moment you refuse to become the identity a system creates to control even where humanity is allowed to go.